Hi, I'm here again today with John. We're doing part two of our video from before.
Part two.
And John was just wondering about like his authentic self and his purpose in life last time we talked. And we talked a bit about his 12th house placements conjunct his ascendant. And today we're going to look at his north node. So in John's chart, or I'm going to talk to you, okay? Don't mind me. I'm going to talk to you instead of about you when you're like right here with me. um, so in your chart, you have your fourth house cusp, which is we call the IC, in Virgo, and your 10th house cusp in Pisces, and that's the midheaven. And so basically, what this means is that your like demeanor around the house and like the way you are like behind closed doors, like your private self is Virgo. So that tends to be very practical, very detail oriented. There's this tendency towards perfectionism, but it's also like service oriented. So like the people who know you best know that, you know, in your own home or like in private, you take care of little practical things for people. I don't know if you're familiar with the five love languages, but
I am.
to me, Virgo feels very much like an acts of service kind of love language, like idea. So like, you know, with, you know, people like just around your house, you know, maybe you're like that. And this comes from early childhood. Like that's when this is formed. It's your relationship with your family of origin that determines this demeanor. However, you have your south node, which is basically like what you have already mastered and your comfort zone, and an area where you might tend to over focus earlier in life, is in your fourth house, which is, you know, also this like home life, you know, your family of origin, and then later on in life your own like home and family. That like that's all fourth house stuff. And even though your fourth house is in Virgo, your south node is in Libra in your fourth house.
Okay.
So Libra is more diplomatic and tries to create harmony, strives for fairness, and wants to make the peace, keep the peace, and consider other people's feelings and perspectives. And um, so so basically, like you were a peacemaker and peacekeeper around the house in like earlier in life, and you would, you know, do things for people a lot too. So that's kind of like where you're coming from. Now the idea with the nodes is that the south node is the comfort zone, and sometimes we can be a little bit too extreme in that area
You mean
because
like lazy?
what's that?
You mean like too extreme in the comfort area, like lazy?
Well, with the south node in the fourth house, you could be like too much of a private person. You
Okay.
could be like too much of a homebody. You could be too focused on like family at the expense of focusing on your career or, you know, the world at large. And and yeah, there is like kind of a comfort, like, you know, the homebody thing can be comfort focused and, oh, I don't feel like going anywhere kind of a thing too.
Right. Right.
So your north node is opposite that in your 10th house. Now your 10th house cusp is in Pisces, and Pisces is like, you're going to see a lot of the same themes with Pisces that you see with your 12th house, which is what we talked about last time. So it's very flowy. It's represented by like two fish tied together. So you've got like the two extremes of this archetype, this Pisces archetype. One of them is trying to like swim up towards enlightenment, and the other is trying to like go hide in the shadows and like hide from reality, and like is very much into escapism and that kind of thing. So with your 10th house cusp in Pisces, like professionally, you may have had a tendency to kind of go with the flow and uh, just, it is a water sign, so there's some focus on feelings, but it's like mutable water, so it's not, so okay, so Cancer, which is where you're, well, you've got a lot of stuff in Cancer. Your ascendant, Sun, Mars, and Venus are all in Cancer. So that is cardinal water. Cardinal means initiating. So like all those areas, it's about initiating feelings, and feelings can be intuition, sensation, or emotions, but like Cancer is, among other things, very focused on like setting a mood, or like creating feelings of comfort, or sometimes with Cancer it's not even always like a warm fuzzy feeling. Sometimes it's setting the mood to be able to process some deeper stuff too. Like that can be the like how it feeds into Scorpio, because there's like a, it's called a trine, but it's an active positive relationship between Cancer and Scorpio. So there's more to it than just simply like setting the mood. Like and I don't mean that in the way people often mean it when they say setting the mood. I mean just in general, like setting the emotional tone for in.
Just for myself, or also for groups of people that I'm around and things like that?
Well, it's your ascendant, so to you this is just kind of like your default thing that you do without even thinking about it, or without like even being intentional about it. It's sort of your personality in a way. Like you kind of change the mood of a situation just by showing up into it, and you might not even be fully aware of how you're doing that, because you've got these 12th house placements. Your Sun and Mars are in your 12th house, so you might be showing up in a situation and not even recognizing that when you show up and you're in a bad mood, all of a sudden everybody's in a bad mood.
Yeah, I'm being more aware of that intentionally now,
Okay.
and not necessarily just the bad mood stuff, but also being able to almost shift the mood or the space where I'm at, be it at the hot springs or somewhere, especially at places where the people are a little bit more calm and the vibration is a little bit more flowy. It seems like
Right.
I can change that a little bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's your Sun, so that's the way in which you shine in life. Your Mars is there, so it's what your drive in life is to do. And your Venus is there, so it's your concept of what you find beautiful and lovely. So like these are some really important things that, and with your ascendant there's your personality too. So like this is a very big focus for you. So now things are going to get tricky though. All right, so you have, like I was saying, your 10th house cusp, which is your midheaven, is in Pisces, but then you have your north node in the 10th house. So it's like the same area of life. It's basically like the world at large. So it's your public image, it's how you interact with the public, it's your reputation, like it's how the world at large sees you, basically, and how you interact with the world the way it is. And you have not just your north node there, but you also have Saturn and Chiron there. Now, Saturn represents restrictions, delays, limitations, hard lessons, how we hold ourselves back as well, our sense of responsibility. So it's likely that, and Saturn is like not a happy camper in Aries. Like, you know, Saturn in Capricorn is like, you know, just super comfortable. But Saturn in Aries, it's like Aries has this impulsive, like spark of life, impetuous, like it's this naive enthusiasm to just like go and do and be and live, and it's like this larger than life energy. And Capricorn is so like restrictive and like almost like withholding in a way, like you, it's how you like withhold yourself from other people. So so having that placement in Aries, like it's probably, and it's in your 10th house too. So this is probably in, at least in the past, an area where you like, you know, sometimes you'd have this drive to like push forward, like in your profession, or like make yourself known in the world, and like, you know, go out there and like do something big, you know. Cancer is cardinal fire, so it's like initiating spirit, right? So like you want to go do something,
Mhm.
but then Saturn's like, no, I probably shouldn't do that. So like it kind of curtails the boldness of Aries in a chart when it's there. And by the way, it also represents one's father in the birth chart. So being in the 10th house, your dad might have cared a lot about public image, and you know, Aries is arguably the most masculine sign. So uh, like public image of what manhood looks like, or something like that, might have been pretty important to your dad. And so then you also have Chiron in Aries, and Chiron in Aries is also a pretty difficult placement. So interestingly, Chiron is this asteroid that has uh, like an orbit through the zodiac, like around the sun through the zodiac, that is not completely like the same length of time through every sign, and it actually spends quite a bit of time in Aries compared to some other signs. So this is something that humans in general just have to deal with. And being in being in the 10th house in Aries means that the lower expression of Aries, which can be aggression, like that's one of the like lower expressions of Aries. Uh, you know, that's something that could have been a painful thing for you at some point in life. And the interesting thing here, though, is that while you have all three of these like placements in Aries, none of them are so close to each other that they're what we call conjunct. So they're all in Aries, but they're not like close together the way like your Mars, Sun, Ascendant, and Venus are all very close together. So like while they impact each other to some extent, it's not like they're combining energy the way a conjunction or placements in a conjunction would. Are you following me with that?
I think so. So does that
Okay.
mean that that is less powerful in the aggression because they're not all
Well,
together, or
well, basically, like if your Saturn was conjunct your Chiron, it would mean that this like feeling of responsibility about how you use this bold energy is also your deepest pain in life, but they're not that close together. So like Chiron, your deepest pain in life, and Chiron is called the wounded healer, by the way. That's what the archetype is. It's where we go through some pain in life and we learn how to be compassionate and healing with others who have endured similar wounds because of what we've been through. So um,
I love that. Yeah.
I love that too. And what a lot of people think, so if you look at mythology, uh, Chiron is the centaur that is a doctor and gets this wound that he can't heal. So he's this talented doctor that can go around and heal other people, but he can never heal himself. And I do not believe that that's true of Chiron in our birth charts. I think that the key to healing ourselves with our own Chiron energy is to extend the same compassion to ourselves that we would extend to other people. And I have experienced some degree of, well, I would say a great degree of Chiron healing this way in my own experience, and I've seen it happen too. So I think the wounded healer archetype is very relevant with Chiron, but we can also heal ourselves with the same compassion that we extend to others.
The same
And
self-love that, well, the love that we extend to others should be returned to ourselves as self-love. Yeah, that's strong foundation for me.
so yes, sounds like you already get that very well.
Well, I don't know to what extent, but I'm aware of it, and that awareness is definitely helping me. So that absolutely rings true.
Awesome. Awesome. And because your 10th house cusp is in Pisces, Pisces is very, very sometimes sympathetic, sometimes empathetic, and sometimes just moody. It depends on how mature the person with that, you know, carrying that Pisces energy expression at that moment happens to be. But yeah, like extending compassion and empathy to other people is basically a big part of, you know, how you exist in the world at large,
And
right?
now,
So
is that are you talking presently or past, or kind of just generally? Because in the past it wasn't like that. In the past it was the opposite. It seemed like.
the downside of Pisces is that it can be overly submissive and kind of escapist. So like in the past, if you know, weren't feeling the higher expression in Pisces, the lower expression may have been like losing yourself, being too submissive, um, being overly emotional, being a little wishy-washy, or
Well, you mentioned the word escapist. I mean, that rings really true for my past. I
okay.
mean, years ago for sure.
All right, awesome. You know, I love that. You know, if I do a consultation or a reading like this for somebody who's say 25, it's so different than when I do one for someone who's say 50,
Right.
because you know, I'm like, okay, this is where you're headed, and in this case it's like, well, I could see how this could have been an issue like earlier in your life, but clearly you've been mastering some of these, you know, higher expressions and lessons as you
Only recently,
move
though. I
forward.
mean, this has
Oh,
been
okay.
something. Yeah, only recently. So, and I'll be 52 this summer. So I
Okay.
would say 3 or 4 years, 3 years ago maybe is when I started being more aware of some of the things that we're talking about. And then now looking
Interesting.
back and hearing this and looking back, I can definitely see, yeah, there is a lot of escapism going on. And I'm not sure about submissiveness. I guess submissiveness through escapism, maybe.
Sure. Sure. I hope it's okay for me to bring this up. I noticed in your timeline on Facebook, you know, or like some things that you posted on Facebook a while back, that you were in the military at one point.
I was in the Air Force for 4 years.
Okay, so that can be very, very relevant to this, because when you join the military, you are kind of losing yourself. You know, you're giving up your own volition and
Absolutely.
kind of like selling your will to the government in a way. I hope that doesn't sound really insensitive, but
No,
but
I signed on a line. I remember the day I signed on that line. So
so what you were doing is signing yourself up to be submissive, essentially. So at some point in your career, submissiveness was part of what you did, and then because there are also 10th house Aries placements, it's very possible that some of those military experiences have, that Chiron in Aries, that's pain related to aggressiveness a lot of times. Sometimes it's related to a lack of volition, lack of going after the things that you want in life. Like that can also be a Chiron and Aries theme. And I find with people with Chiron and Aries, a lot of times there's like some anger issues that they don't know how to work through, at least at a certain point, because you know life used to be like parenting used to be a lot different than it is now. And it used to be that you teach your kids to repress their feelings. That's like how you did parenting. And what ends up happening is it creates a lot of anger issues that just explode at some point. So a lot of times with Chiron and Aries, there is a problem with like occasional temper issues. And there's multiple ways it can manifest. But what I was thinking was with your midheaven in Pisces, but then so much of your 10th house is in Aries, and you've got these 10th house placements in Aries, that kind of makes a lot of sense with a military background.
Well, and I was only in for 4 years, so it was a short time frame. But I can also see those aspects prior to getting into the military too.
Oh, okay.
For sure. Because I was like I mentioned offline, I was pretty muted with my life and lots of things going on. So I didn't have a lot of relationships, and so that was the escapism that was happening. And of course, that would bring up aggressive tendencies as well, which I can remember, very aggressive tendencies. So it's good to kind of have this talk, and so you can really kind of see where have you been, and then also that helps kind of show where you're going to go in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that might be related to the aggression that you mentioned is that you do have Mars in Cancer, and Mars is not super comfortable in Cancer. Cancer is, very much about feelings and moods, and Mars is a warrior, and what I've experienced with people with Mars in Cancer is that they can be very gentle a lot of times, but then sometimes there's this really intense emotional reactivity. And being in your 12th house, that would be something that would feel like it's out of your control, and something that you might even be a little bit blind to, at least at a certain level of awareness in your life.
Well, I was just going to say that awareness is opening up. So I can definitely feel, as I'm getting to know more about astrology, all kinds of different things, plant medicine, all kinds of stuff, is that the awareness of that Mars ego person coming up is easier to see. But also when I start being more aware of when it's happening, later on, I've been able to actually use it in a very productive way, depending on the situation. So, and again, I didn't know it was Mars until now, and everything that we're talking about, but employing that energy when it needs to be in a certain setting. Somebody's in danger, or somebody's getting bullied, or whatever it may be. Plugging into it is becoming a little bit more easy, and because of that, it's much more gentle, but you can still tell when I'm serious.
Excellent. That is exactly what the higher expression of Mars and Aries energy looks like. Like it's there when you need it, but you know how to use it proportionately to the actual threat and level of force required in that situation, rather than it being, an overreaction.
Right.
Or being there like kind of low key all the time. Like, some people just walk around angry like all day, every day. Like that's another like lower expression of Mars or Aries energy.
Cool.
Yeah. So the interesting thing in your chart is that you've got this North Node in the 10th house in Aries. So North Node in the 10th house, that's kind of like, you almost might call that a fame aspect in a way. And that doesn't mean like A-list celebrity fame necessarily, but like you're meant to be in the public eye
Hmm.
later in life. Like that's, and I kind of feel like you are, like you definitely have a presence, at least on Facebook. Like you get, you know, a lot of reactions on your posts, and you also have this, how do I put this? It takes a certain amount of boldness and bravery to share the vulnerable kinds of things. Or, okay, how do I put it? It takes a certain, okay, I've got an old saying that I think works really well. Real men wear pink.
Love it.
So I don't want to like tap too far into like gender norm issues, because it's not where I'm trying
No,
to go with this, but like masculinity, really strongly healthy masculine energy definitely can bring softness with it and nurturing with it. And um, the way I see it, like yin and yang, like can only exist, like you can only be as healthy with your yang as you are with your yin, and
absolutely.
vice versa.
Right. And so masculinity, in my opinion, and I'm learning this again fairly recently, masculinity needs to be balanced with the vulnerability as well.
Mhm.
And you know, I think that's one of the things that, just as a human species, we've been domesticated out of for
Right.
many years. You know, and I can only speak to, you know, our society in the United States, but um, yeah, masculinity with vulnerability is powerful.
Mhm. So you and I have a similarity in our charts that I find pretty
Oh,
interesting.
cool.
You have a conjunction of the sun, Mars, and Venus all together, and I do too. And it's kind of cool because talking to you about this is like just resonates a lot with my own experience of having that conjunction, because your sun is like how you shine in life, right? And Mars is masculinity and Venus is femininity. And having all three of them together means that like in a way you were kind of born to like find exactly what we're talking about right now, how yin and yang go together, how they can be healthy together, how they're expressed. You know, sun is expression. So being able to express both sides of yin and yang, masculinity and femininity, in healthy ways and together is like, is kind of a big deal to you. And I'm the same. I used to be much more masculine than I am right now, actually. My sun, Mars, Venus conjunction is actually in Aries, which is, like I said before, arguably the most masculine sign. So I used to be a lot more masculine than feminine. And now I feel like I can go either way with it really easily. And I can go to extremes when necessary.
Right.
Because to me, that's what balance is. Balance is not like equality necessarily. Like I'm not always equally yin and yang. It's being able to be whatever the situation calls for, basically.
Yeah, and
That's what
there's
balance
another
is.
piece to it though too. Is you know, for me, I don't want to get back to that fully masculine, you know, asshole energy that I used to have. Very arrogant, very cocky, and that all came from insecurities. So I've tended to kind of move towards more the softness, or I've tried to move more toward the softness. But now I'm coming back and seeing that there's actually a a function, a reason to be able to hold on to the masculinity side or the hard side as well,
Mm-hmm.
because you know. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't want to. I'm trying not to overreact too much that I don't want to ever go back to that, and then
Right.
and not understand there's value to that as well
Yeah.
in the balance that we're talking about.
You know, when I was basically a few years back, I made this decision that I was going to make peace with, well, find, embrace, and make peace with my feminine side. And part of doing that, it was part of doing that, a big part of doing that, well, basically the way of doing that for me was learning how to process my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And the subject of anger became very, very important in learning how to process feelings, because it's a feeling and it's natural. And I had this concept, feelings are never wrong, but so many spiritual traditions teach that anger is wrong and that you should be gentle. And I just, I sat with that for at least a year and a half or 2 years, like that question. I didn't have the answer. I was okay with not having the answer, but I was sitting there in the awareness that I didn't have the answer. And, just being open to whatever I could learn or discover about it. And then I watched this movie. It was like a movie from when I was a kid or a teenager or something like that. It's called The Iron Giant. And
Uh-huh. I
and
remember it.
basically it's set during the Cold War. And there's a boy that finds this like at least 100-foot tall iron giant that has this very futuristic tech we don't even have now. And there's a scene in it, and spoiler alert, like, for anybody watching, there's a scene in it where the giant, as soon as he sees a weapon, like suddenly goes into war mode and starts shooting at anything that's moving. And then that becomes problematic at some point. And then there's another point during kind of the climax of the movie where, the military is firing these missiles at him and he's holding the boy and he's flying. Like, it turns out this thing can fly too, which you don't know through the whole movie. But suddenly I'm like imagining like being that little boy being held in this safe embrace by this like extremely like monstrously powerful robot
Right.
with all this destructive force, but it was doing everything it could to protect him. And I thought, oh, that's what anger is for.
Right. Right.
It's
That's
there
a
because we
great,
need to protect.
yeah, that's a great analogy and awareness for sure.
So it's just a matter, and I made a whole video about this. I'll put a link in the description, but it's about Mars, basically, the beast within.
And where does
Um,
it, for us both, the Mars sits where?
uh, right near our sun and Venus. So
Okay.
in your case, it's in the 12th house in Cancer. And in my case, it's in the first house in Aries, depending on which house system I use. But it's in Aries.
Okay.
And so basically, I think modern society has gotten to this point where like there used to be so much aggression, and people got to a point where they're like, you know what, that's not cool. Like, we don't need to be so violent with each other. But now, like, I almost want to say there's like too much punishment for displays of aggression, because sometimes it's appropriate to get in someone's face and swear at them. It just depends on the situation.
Right.
And I'm not saying that should always be the go-to if there's a confrontation, but it really does just depend on the situation. And that drive that we have to defend ourselves and to go after what we want isn't just about like getting into confrontations. It's also what we need in order to compete, like in the job market, for example, or even athletically, or for a partner, or in any way. It's our drive in general in life. It's our ability to go for things. So this is a very powerful and important drive, and people are basically like modern society is basically teaching people to repress it a bit too much, I think. And then
Yeah.
what ends up happening is that it explodes and then
Right.
gets punished even more. And then
Right.
the
Explodes one way or
explosions get
another. It doesn't
bigger.
have to necessarily explode into, one-on-one anger, but it can explode into suicide. It can explode into drug addiction,
That's true.
alcoholism.
Absolutely. Depression, autoimmune disorders, um, cancer. Like, if you repress anger, there are long-term health consequences for it.
Balance, balance, balance.
Yep. Indeed. Indeed, exactly. And you and I are here to learn the balance between masculinity and femininity. So, so it's very interesting. So the thing that I started to talk about earlier, and then we got into this fascinating tangent about masculinity and femininity, which I absolutely love, is that your nodal axis. Okay, so returning to the nodal axis, the south node is like the comfort zone and where you have like kind of early in life or before even being born into this particular lifetime have a level of mastery there. And there's this tendency to want to like be there and like go overboard with it at the expense of the north node, which is completely opposite of it. And so basically, like earlier in life or in a previous life, you would feel comfortable being a homebody and just being, you know, pleasant and diplomatic and harmonious in your private life at the expense of going out into the world and like carving a path for yourself, Aries style. And so basically, in your particular case, your Sun and Mars square your nodes. So there's a T-square with your 12th house placements, your Sun and your Mars. And what that means is that, like, so the north and south node are areas that are difficult to balance. Sometimes we go into our north node, but we like overshoot and go too far and forget to bring the lessons from our south node with it, and then end up kind of ungrounded in how we express it. So maybe you can think of times in your professional life or like public, in the public arena, where you got a little bit too spark of life or
Right.
like a little bit too much decisiveness and initiative, a little bit too much drive, a little too much impetuousness.
I would say
Um,
that's probably my first half of my life. You know,
so
I'm, to some extent.
and that's pretty typical, I think. This is something that you know, we all struggle a little bit with our nodal axis. I think we go too far into our north node without bringing the lessons of our south node with us, or we get like, or when things don't go well in our north node, we want to retreat into our south node and not even try in our north node anymore. And neither of those things is the sweet spot for us. The idea is
But
to,
is the teeing of those for me, where it's teeing up, is that coming into balance?
it does not bring it into balance. What it ends up doing effectively for a T-square is the apex of it, which in this case is the Sun and Mars, end up just being an energy drain for you. Like a lot of energy gets stuck there. And the key to relieving that, it's kind of like a bottleneck for energy almost. The key to relieving it is to focus on the point opposite of the apex. So in your case, it would be sixth house in Capricorn. And Capricorn is very proactive in practical ways. Like it's also a cardinal sign, so it's about initiative and starting things, creating things. But it is an earth sign. So it's about like the physical world, practical, material, like productive kinds of things. And the sixth house is about service to others and about managing our health and about just kind of like the daily grind, like chores and errands and that kind of thing. So for you, there's this, like, in order to properly balance your north and south nodes, there needs to be a daily focus on being productive, basically, um, because it takes this takes the pressure off of your Sun and Mars in the 12th house, where like energy tends to like collect and like kind of get stuck there. So having it, so this is in general with any kind of T-square, like focusing on the point opposite of the apex is going to be what relieves some of the pressure from that and frees up energy for you, and creates a lot of personal growth for you. But also because your nodal axis is involved, it means that there's important stuff for you to learn about your Sun and Mars in particular. And I would say, like the way I read natal charts, I would say that focusing a little bit, on what's opposite of that is going to be important for that. Now, you do have your moon and part of fortune in Capricorn, but they're in your 7th house. So for you, partnerships are like partnerships where you can like be productive together, give you a sense of security, like that, like your inner security needs and your inner world is in a comfortable, happy spot when you and your partner can work together on things that like are just like practically helpful in life, or like bring like material success. And you might even well, as you know, the entire universe exists within each one of us. But this might be an area where you actually even try to just like project that onto other people and look for other people, whether it's, your best friend or your like romantic partner in life or business partners, but you might like try to look for that quality in other people, that
So we could
practicality.
co-create together for co-creation.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is, so you already have this focus in your 7th house, but you want to also make sure you're focusing on it in your 6th house. So it's like, daily chores and like, your day-to-day lifestyle, your focus, like, just like I would say it's like your lifestyle and how you like manage your health. And like I said, there's also a little bit of focus on service to others there as well. So it's going to feel a little unnatural to focus on this if you haven't done that before, but it's going to take a lot of the pressure off of the Sun and Mars in your 12th house.
Cool.
And
That makes sense.
what's that?
It makes sense. Absolutely.
And if you do have like partners that, whether it's business partners, good friends, or romantic partners, just like people where it's like a one-to-one kind of thing, where you can focus on that kind of thing together, it's going to make your moon very happy.
Great.
So like I said, the trick is to just make sure it's not just 7th house, but also 6th house focus. And the axis between the 6th house and the 12th house is like, are you familiar with the Serenity Prayer by chance?
Somewhat.
Okay.
Something about give me the wisdom not to worry about things I can't change and stuff like that.
Something like that. It's give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
There you go.
And there are 2 key spots where I see this in like as being relevant to astrology. One of them is how Pisces turns into Aries, which is very relevant to your particular natal chart because you've got the midheaven in Pisces, but then your north node in Aries. And I also see it as being related to the 6th and 12th house axis, because in the 12th house, that's where spiritual surrender is the ticket. It's where we accept the things that we cannot change and just make peace with all of it, and surrender ourselves into oneness. And the 6th house, on the other hand, is where we actually go out and make a difference, where we like do something about stuff through our work, where we work on things.
Yeah, those 2 houses seem obviously,
Polarized. Yeah.
Acceptance for oneness and letting things flow versus getting things done.
Making a
Definitely.
difference. Yeah. Be practical daily work. Yeah. So in the sixth house, we work on things. In the 12th house, we accept them the way they are. And finding the balance between the two is going to be important for you to find the balance between your comfort zone and your destiny, essentially.
Great stuff.
Yeah. I love astrology. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you think of any other questions off the top of your head
No,
right now?
I can't wait to review this again because, you know, I took some notes, but it's going to be nice that you recorded. I just want to thank you for your time. And I know the internet thing was kind of a goofy thing, but I think the two-part thing is kind of a nice thing too. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm going to go back and review everything, and I appreciate it so much, Joy. Thank you.
you're welcome. And you know, I actually really think it worked out a lot better the way that we ended up doing it. So we could even say it was a little bit of a blessing, even if it was a pain that your internet went out when it did last time.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you very much, John. And I will talk to you soon, I imagine. And thank you, everybody who watched this video. Feel free to leave any questions or comments in the comments below.
Bye, everybody.